All right, guys, welcome to the show. Welcome to the show. We got another wild one for you. Never a dull moment, never a dull day, y'all. So everybody do me a favor, please subscribe to the channel. That helps out massively. We got a lot of stuff to get to today. So we're going to talk about CNN now is out with some brutal fact checks debunking Biden's narrative of like, you guys always underestimated me. Jack, wait, what? Anyway, they're in outright like angry mode here. I think CNN and other establishment outlets feel like they were helping gaslight on behalf of Biden, saying like, oh, anything questioning his mental health is it's a cheap fake video. And then now, after everybody saw the debate, they're kind of humiliated. So they're making up for it by like hyper focusing on it. So we'll get to that. Then look, I have to do it. I'm doing a deep dive on Trump's golf game and Biden's golf game because Trump, in his rally the other day, came out and said, I'm challenging Biden to a live debate this week, just me and him, and also I'm challenging him to a golf match. Okay, so we'll talk about that. We have some Democrats saying the quiet part out loud on Biden and why he really won in the first place against Bernie in the primary. That's an amazing video. And we'll also discuss how Boeing got away with murder. They got away with it. And I'm not even necessarily talking about the whistleblowers. That story's wild enough. I'm actually talking about the plane crashes that were inevitably coming that they did dick about. So we'll talk about that and more. And by the way, guys, another thing, everybody subscribe to Crystal Kyle and Friends because we got Ken Klippenstein out there. He's my boy, but we got Ken Klippenstein out there dancing on my political grave because his Substack hopped above Crystal Kyle and Friends. So let's get us back in front of Ken Klippenstein. Hook a brother up with a sub. We got a lot of great interviews coming up. We got Scahill coming up. He interviewed Hamas. We're going to talk about that, talk to him about that. Then we're going to try to get Jill Stein, Chase Oliver, the Libertarian candidate, trying to get Charlemagne. So a lot of good stuff coming. Sign up for Crystal Kyle and Friends. All right, let's go ahead and dive into it. Enough fucking around. I mean, this clip speaks for itself. This is Harry Enten on CNN. And what he's doing here is responding to Biden's argument that, look, man, you guys are telling me to drop out. You guys are being really hard on me. But the fact of the matter is, you underestimated me in 2020. You underestimated the Democrats and myself in 2022. And now here we are in 2024. You're doing the same goddamn thing. I won the last times. I'll win this time. So just shut up, sit down, and relax. This is effectively the Biden argument. The difference is I'm making it about 78 times more coherent than he can, right? But here's the response. And this is, again, it's just numbers, right? Like he's just going to cite objective reality, and it shatters Biden's narrative. Watch this.
I just want to point out where the polls are now, where they were at this point back in 2020, and Joe Biden's worst position in the polls back in 2020. Right now, Donald Trump leads in an aggregate of national polls by about 3 percentage points. If you go back 4 years ago at this point, Joe Biden was ahead by 9 points.
Let that one sink in. At this point before the 2020 race, Biden was up 9 on average. Now he's down 3.
I then decided to take it a step further. What was Biden's worst 2020 polling position? He was ahead by 4 points, which basically matched what he ended up beating Donald Trump by in the national popular vote. So,
okay, that's an important point. So when Biden was up 9 at this point before the 2020 race, the actual result in the election was he won by 4. So he underperformed his polling numbers by 5 points. By the way, I remember this distinctly because the day of the election or the day before the election, I did a prediction video, and I think it was like Biden about 343 electoral votes, and I was doing it based on my analysis of the numbers. And then Biden ended up winning, what was it, like 306 electoral votes? So he underperformed in terms of the popular vote, and he underperformed in terms of the electoral college. Now, he still won, I mean, relatively comfortably. I mean, it was really only maybe 50,000 votes in the swing states that really decided the election. But this is a big deal. He underperformed by 5 points then, and now we're talking about he's down 3 up front. All right, keep going.
3-point advantage for Donald Trump is Donald Trump's best position versus Joe Biden, whether you include the polls this year or you include the polls last cycle. The idea that the polls underestimated Joe Biden last time around, simply put, does not hold any water, Mr. Berman.
Not in the general election, certainly. What about in terms of being underestimated in the Trump era in general?
Yeah, so I decided to expand upon our search. Who outperformed their July national polls? This is major elections during the Trump era. We can start in the midterms, right? Take a look here. This is a 2022 midterm. This is a generic congressional ballot. In fact, Republicans were underestimated by a point. They outperformed their July polls and the actual result by a percentage point.
Okay, all right. I need to pause on that one real quick. That one is a little misleading, to be honest, because I remember everybody and their mother at the time was saying there's going to be a red wave. Red wave, red wave, red wave. Michael Moore came out and aggressively said, ain't no fucking red wave. Credit to him for that. And I took the agnostic position. I was like, I don't know. It could be a red wave, but it also very, very possibly could not be. I don't know. I think everybody else is overconfident with the red wave prediction, right? But I guess the reason they were making the red wave prediction, the bigger factor was historical trends, right? Like they had their data points and they made the argument. I heard a lot of people, even smart people, were making the argument. But apparently the House Republicans outperformed their polls by 1 percentage point, but still drastically underperformed. I guess they were, I don't know, I don't remember what exactly the data was other than the historical trends where people were so convinced there was going to be a red wave. But I genuinely didn't know that the end polling results, the Republicans outperformed it by 1 point. Because if that was the scenario, I would have expected the actual red wave. It didn't come. So maybe it was like the way the support was spread throughout the country was such that it still wasn't nearly enough. But because we've seen this before, right? Democrats have, won huge in terms of raw numbers, but actually like lost some seats sometimes for the congressional district. So it can get a little weird, but I did not know that in the 2022 midterms, Republicans actually outperformed by 1 percentage point. And the reason I didn't know that is because they didn't have anything close to a red wave. So anyway, let's continue.
To 2018, Democrats did outperform their polls, but just by a point. Basically, the polls were right on at this particular point in the midterm elections. We talk about the presidential race. Last time around, Donald Trump actually did better in the results than his July polls by 5 points. You go back to 2016, you see something very similar. That is, the July polls actually underestimated Donald Trump. He outperformed his July polls. So the idea in the Trump era that the polls have underestimated Democrats, whether it be in a Joe Biden matchup, whether it be a matchup against Hillary Clinton, whether it be in the midterms, at least in the national polling that right now shows Donald Trump in his strongest position, simply put, is not true. If anything, the polls have underestimated Republicans during the Trump era, especially in the presidential races in 2016 and in 2020.
On that,
Now, there is a little asterisk in this conversation, which is, it is true that all of the hand-picked Trump candidates in their various races, they get their asses kicked. Doug Mastriano got destroyed by Josh Shapiro. You have Fetterman beat Oz, even though Fetterman had a stroke and couldn't talk, right? But if Biden wants to make an argument, there's your argument right there. Hey, look, Fetterman couldn't talk and he won, right? Like that probably is his best argument. Carrie Lake got destroyed. Blake Masters got destroyed. So it is true that all of the handpicked Trump candidates perform worse than the generic Republicans. So Biden actually has a point on that. He actually has a point on, look, he's a convicted felon. We've never been here before. He does have a point on all of you idiots were predicting a red wave in 2022, and that didn't happen at all. So he does have little selective things he could point to. But I guess the point is, even factoring all that in, he would still be losing this election. Because Trump's lead is so big that even if you say somehow Biden's going to overperform the polls by a lot and Trump's going to underperform, even in that scenario, it still looks like a small margin of victory for Trump. So anyway.
How unusual is it for a Republican to be ahead by this much right now?
Yeah, so let's go all the way back. Who led in early July polls? Well, right now, Donald Trump is ahead. Go back in 2020, a Democrat, Biden. 2016, Hillary Clinton, a Democrat. 2008, 2012, a Democrat. Even in 2004, where George W. Bush ended up winning, John Kerry was actually ahead in the polls at this point. You have to go all the way back to 2000, to George W. Bush being ahead in the early July polls. You have to go all the way back to the end of the 20th century, beginning of the 21st century, to find a Republican ahead at this point. 24 years. At this particular point, the idea that a Democrat is ahead, there are voters in the electorate who are dealing with a poll position they have never seen before, and that is a Republican leading in the national popular vote, at least according to the polls.
A very unusual situation. One thing I just will point out, Biden may be talking about the primaries in 2020, where he did not do well in Iowa and New Hampshire, and then he ended up with the nomination. But that's a different animal. That is a vastly different animal than any kind of a general election setting.
Correct. In fact, if you were to look back at the 2020 national Democratic primary polls, they mostly had Biden ahead, except for that little small portion, right, when he lost Iowa and then lost New Hampshire and then lost in Nevada. But overall, those primary polls had him ahead, and then he won. And certainly when it came to the general election, the polls always had Joe Biden. There wasn't a single poll that met CNN standards for publication that ever had Donald Trump ahead in 2020. And now you have a slew of them. And the average, of course, definitely has Donald Trump ahead.
History ain't what he says it is on this front. Harriet, and thank you very much.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
Look, let's call it what it is. That's devastating. It was devastating. This whole piece is devastating. It almost makes me more pissed at the media because it goes to show you they can do a good job if they want to do a good job, if they try to do a good job. And this is a rare instance where they're doing it. And I mean, it's nice to see. I'm happy they're doing a good job now. But where the fuck was this previously? Again, it wasn't that long ago that the media was calling every video of Biden looking like he's 1,012 years old a cheap fake. So... But by the way, even to the argument of like, hey, you guys underestimated me in the 2020 primary, even to that argument, it's bullshit. Because Bernie won the first 3 contests, and then it took all the king's horses and all the king's men to put Biden on their shoulders to get him across the finish line. To that point, nobody had won the first 3 contests in a primary and then lost the primary. But what happened is all of the centrist candidates dropped out. The establishment elite candidates dropped out. They all endorsed Biden on the same day. And uniformly across the board, the media went all in on demonizing Bernie Sanders aggressively, saying he's like Che Guevara and Fidel Castro and he wants the U.S. to be the Soviet Union and he's going to take all your money and taxes and he's an extremist, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He can't be Trump. He can't be Trump. He can't be Trump. This is what they said about Bernie. And that's why you won, Joe Biden. That's why you won. He's overestimating his own ability here. So, brutal fact check from CNN. And, I don't know. Are we getting to the point where it's enough pressure? I guess we'll find out soon. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop. And watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.